Soldier Mage King, Chapter 16, Lancelot. Lancelot had always dreamed of being a knight, ever since his village had been rolled over by bandits when he was young. He'd honed his skills since then and was quite good with a sword. It was time for him to try the ultimate test. The road to Camelot wasn't easy, with only his pack and his hard-won sword. He wasn't the only one in the area, though. He spotted a girl, maybe a year or two his junior, picking mushrooms, depositing them in a basket beside her. She was pretty, pale with sharp features and big blue eyes. Her hair was tied up with a blue scarf that clashed wonderfully against the red of her tunic. The screech of a creature drew his attention, though, as something came barreling out of the woods, straight at the girl, who screamed, scrambling away, only to trip over a tree root. Lancelot came to her rescue without a second thought, though his blade clashed seemingly harmlessly against the thing's hide. The girl grabbed his free hand and they ran. She pulled him down into the hollow of a tree and they hid, the screeching passing them by inches. "You saved my life," the girl said, a bit breathless. "I'm Merlin," she said, and he smiled lightly, though pain was taking over his mind. "Lancelot," he said, reaching out a hand to her. Only then did they spot the blood on his stomach. The next thing he knew, he was blinking up at a stone ceiling. A face swam into his view, and he blinked to clear his vision. It was the girl, Merlin. Her scarf had migrated south and now sat around her neck, her hair pulled back in a simple braid. She smiled down at him. "How are you feeling?" she asked, helping him ease himself upright. "Good. Where am I? I was making for Camelot," he said, and her grin grew wider. "I have excellent news, then. You are currently on the cot of the court physician of Camelot. He's out at the moment," she said, handing him a cup of water. He blinked. A court physician was a busy man. How had this girl convinced him to see Lancelot? As pretty as she was, she didn't dress like nobility. "The court physician? Why would he see me?" he asked. Merlin frowned slightly. "Why wouldn't he? Gaius tries to help everyone he can." "I'm not anyone special," Lancelot insisted. A tut from the doorway had him turning and groaning slightly as he did. "You saved my apprentice's life. I'd call that a bit special," the old man in the doorway said. Lancelot's gaze flicked back to Merlin, who grinned. Lancelot could not believe his luck. Not only was his new friend an apprenticed physician who had staunched his bleeding and somehow managed to get him onto her horse and back to Camelot in time to save his life, but she also served as the prince's maidservant. Admittedly, he wasn't wild about the idea of faking nobility, but he'd beaten Prince Arthur himself. He'd also met one of Merlin's other friends, the most beautiful girl he'd ever seen, Guinevere. That almost made it worth it when everything came crashing down around them and he was banished from the city. The griffin could only be destroyed by magic, because of course it could only be destroyed by magic. Merlin really wished they didn't have to leave magic to the final resort. It tended to be the only thing that would actually solve their problems. Arthur had taken his men out to deal with it and left Merlin behind. She'd only caught Lancelot because Gwen had told her he was going after it. The enchantment made blue flames burst to life on Lancelot's lance a split second before it skewered the griffin and broke off in its torso. Merlin's shout of triumph must have roused Arthur, for he sat up and grinned. "You killed it, Lancelot," he shouted and laughed. Merlin rushed to work, checking on the knights Arthur had taken with him. Leon had taken a blow to the head, but nothing too bad. Only one was dead, but several of them had injuries similar to the one Lancelot had attained. Arthur and Lancelot helped Merlin cart the injured knights back to the city and to the larger room near Gaius's chambers set aside for times like this when multiple knights were injured. The whole banquet hall could be transformed into a makeshift hospital when times got bad enough, but luckily it hadn't gotten to that point yet. Once assured that the knights would survive, she sought out Lancelot and Arthur, the former of whom was having a heated argument with his father about if they could reinstate Lancelot's knighthood for killing the griffin. "They might make an exception," Merlin assured her stern-faced friend. "Even if they did, I cannot take it," he said, pulling her aside out of earshot of the guards on the door. "Why not?" "Because I did not kill the griffin. You did." he said, and Merlin felt her blood run cold. Don't be silly, Lancelot, she said, trying for laughter and missing somewhere in the realm of whispered panic. Bregdan Anuel Gefeluek, he repeated. I heard you. Merlin seemed to lose all feeling in her feet, making it impossible to run. She'd been working with Arthur for a while now. Maybe he'd let her choose the axe over the pyre. Anything but the pyre. She didn't realize that she was shaking like a leaf in a gale until Lancelot placed a hand on her shoulder. I will not breathe a word. I will not breathe your secret to a living soul. You have my word, Merlin. She let out a shaking breath. She lunged forward, pulling him into a hug. Thank you, she muttered into his shirt, hiding tears in her eyes. But I will not take credit for something I did not do. No more lies, no more deceit, he said. Merlin scrubbed her eyes and looked around, making sure they were alone. It's the only way I know how to survive, she admitted, and Lancelot's grip tightened slightly as he understood the implication. She had been born with magic, never having a choice in the matter. What will you do? Lancelot's choice was to leave. Merlin skipped out on work for an hour or two to see him off that morning. He had been allowed to keep the armor and even gifted the horse Merlin had borrowed from the stables for him that night. I wish you didn't have to leave, she said, checking his saddle for him. We will see each other again, he said. Merlin reached into her pocket and pulled out a handkerchief with a small G embroidered on the corner. Gwen asked me to deliver this, she said with a grin as Lancelot's face heated. Be safe, my friend. Until we speak again, he said, and Merlin grinned, stepping back from his horse. Until next time, Sir Lancelot, she said, and he nudged his horse into motion. Part of her hurt watching him go. Only one other person had found out her truth like that, Will, and she felt that, as with Will, Lancelot would rather die than betray her. Losing that so soon after finding that kind of friendship again hurt. But perhaps it was better. At least now he wouldn't have to further stain his honor by lying for her. She sighed and turned back to the castle.